We're going to move on to Brian Dorian, Snappy Ambassador for PivX. All right, Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. All right, first time to be on the show. Give the audience a little background on you. The list of accolades is just like it's blowing my computer up. And then let's get into the financial privacy and what you guys do there.
Oh, sure. So, again, thanks for having me on. My name's Brian Dorian. I am with PivX, which stands for Private Instant Verified Transaction. And by with them, I mean I'm one of the community members. We don't have an organization. We'll talk about that in a little bit. My background, though, spans from trying to dedicate my life to go into high academic research. So double majored in chemistry, chemical engineering, double minored in math and biology, finished a doctorate in cellular molecular biophysics. From there, basically launched an education technology company focusing on the patent bar exam. Just sort of jumped into the rabbit hole, as it were, of exploring yourself and then your relationship into the world through ventures, right? And largely trying to help people, which is how, in the first place, I actually got into cryptocurrencies was I started seeing these communities forming, right? So all of these underground communities and people starting to network and talk about this. And all of a sudden, my spidey senses went off. I went, ooh, here's all these little people who never connected before starting to talk. And I went, I want to be part of this, right? It wasn't even about I'm going to make a ton of money on the books and whatever you name it. It was more of, here's a human phenomena that nobody's paying attention to. So that was back in 2011, 2012 for me. And I largely just followed people, right? So I followed the projects that had obviously solid developers, solid technology, but a lot of people around them. And that's how I ended up in PivX.
Okay, what about the financial privacy and why it matters? Let's get into what PivX does.
Sure. So one of the biggest misnomers I would say that was put out in a lot of the media early on was that Bitcoin is this private means of doing transactions, right? So it was largely heralded as a dark market dream because you could keep yourself private, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it's actually kind of not true in a lot of ways because Bitcoin as a crypto is a perfect ledger. So all it really takes is one piece of data, your private data, linked, or somebody knows that they're sending transactions, me to you, then they can track every little bit of your financial transaction. So in essence, it'd be like saying this. Let's say I cut you a check, right? You cashed that check. And then you went to your bank, and the bank all of a sudden said, hey, do you want to see every transaction for Brian Dorian for the rest of history? Yes, no. You can't move anything out of my account. You can't put anything in, but you can see every transaction. That's, in essence, what the majority of cryptocurrencies allow to occur, right? It's not as simple as that, but that's a good acronym or an analogy for what's going on, right? And so you can think about all the forensic teams or corporations and that are just basically piecing data together on you as a consumer, as a family member, right, or as a business person, et cetera, et cetera. Now, for a lot of us in PivX, and I think a lot of people out there, we feel that privacy is a right to all humans as individuals, right? And so, the argument saying, hey, you have nothing to hide, well, then show me all your emails, right? The flip of it is you should have the right to keep your financials private and then disclose when the time is appropriate with those trusted parties, et cetera. But ultimately, that right should be with you. And so PivX, through its technology, through its blockchain, when you can say the distributed ledger technology that it is developed, which is custom, maintains your privacy. So by that, you have the ability to, in essence, have your bank account, your own bank account in PivX. You can make transactions there and send from your bank account that completely anonymize your identity with that transaction. So when you go out to the blockchain or to that ledger, you can see the transaction occurred. However, there's no way to actually link it back to you because of the technology that we've developed, right? So that allows you to have your accounts to pay your contractors, yet there's no way for those contractors to look back into your bank accounts. And that's what PivX does.
Got it. Now, governance in the entity, how the decisions are made and implemented. Bring that up for us.
Yeah, so that's another interesting facet. If people, if your listeners are paying attention or getting under the hood of cryptos and what goes on, is how are decisions made and then implemented in cryptos. You can see a lot of bickering and arguing and back and forth and no movements. So what Pivx has, which is, it's not super unique to Pivx. There's a few, I would say, entities or cryptos out there that have some sort of governance structure whereby there is a means to make decisions and then implement them. So Pivx has this layer called a masternode technology. And that masternode, you can think of it as another layer, an application layer almost, where you can submit proposals into the Pivx network. So in essence, you could sit down today, submit a proposal and say, hey, I'd like to be the official, radio spokesperson for Pivx. Here's what I'd like to do. Have the network give me 50 PIV a month for 3 months. And what happens then is that gets recorded forever into our blockchain. And then every 30 days, there's a voting proposal that opens up. And it's done within our core wallets, which is the technology, the little executable file you download. And right now, you then have the ability, if you're running a masternode, to vote yes or no on proposals. So what happens is this. We have an ability to actually determine what the network should do. And instead of it coming from one or two people, like the CEO or a board or whatever, the decision-making is more coming from the community itself. And we are actually in the process of taking that a step further. So again, it's limited to, as I said, that special network layer, those masternodes, and you need a certain amount of Pivx, right? So you need a certain amount of capital, as it were, in order to have a vote. We want to actually decentralize that even more and allow anyone who has at least a single PIV to have an input into the network to make decisions to vote, right? So that's what we're designing right now, and it's called community design governance.
Got it. All right, let's do this. Let's take a break. I'll come back on the other side. I want to hear about the reward system and deeper technology as you're going forward, all right?
Will do.
We'll be right back with Brian Dorian, Snappy, ambassador for PIVX, PIVX.org. You've been listening to CEO Money with Michael Yorba and Ed Baxter, and this segment brought to you by Tycon Partners. Welcome back to CEO Money. I'm Michael Yorba, your host. All right, we've got Brian Dorian. He is the ambassador for Pivx, PIVX.org. Brian, when we left off, I was going to ask you about the reward system. I'm on your website, poking around here. What's that all about, the reward system?
Yeah. So, real quick overview of cryptocurrencies and how cryptos are, quote unquote, created. So if you think about in the traditional model where you have Bitcoin and all this talk about miners, right? And so you've got all these individuals, or nowadays gigantic farms, they call them, tons of computer power, all these, quote unquote, miners that are crunching away on these algorithms, right? They're hashing away. So why in the world would they want to do that? Well, because right now, if they solve the complex mathematical problem, they get a cryptocurrency. And if they're doing Bitcoin, if they solve it first, bing, they just earn Bitcoin, which is, roughly worth, nowadays, 7,500, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, right? So for them, it's worth it because the current valuation of that on the market is what it is, right? So that's the incentivization. The reward is getting that cryptocurrency. And so that's available whatever the block time is. And the block time in Bitcoin is said it's 2 minutes, and in other cryptocurrencies it's less, it's more. So in Pivx, we have the same thing. We have a block time, right? So meaning all the transactions that occur within that specific time frame need to be all calculated and verified. So what's different is in our algorithm and our technology that we have, we don't need miners in the traditional sense of miners, right? So in mining, you're competing against everybody. Right? Whoever has the most power, right? Whoever has the fastest car shoots down the drag race first wins. Well, that's a really competitive, and that's why you have all of these massive energy farms sucking up. Well, in Pivx, we have what's called a proof of stake model, where it's not about how much power you have. It literally comes down to a consensus model of you link into the blockchain itself. So everyone who's part of Pivx can run the blockchain on their computer, and it takes up a little bit of memory, maybe like 1% or 2% on your computer. So it's kind of basically, you can think about it, idle in the background. And, well, what's the incentivization to do it? Well, the incentivization is you're, one, supporting the network, and two, if you're selected as the validator for that round, you get a reward. right? So instead of having to go out and buy all this fancy equipment and et cetera, no, you just by being part of the network and securing the blockchain yourself, you can earn rewards. I forget the latest calculations, but it's anywhere from 5 to 10% a year ROI in PIVX itself, right? So if you had 100 and you stake every day, which basically means you kept your wallet open and you were securing the blockchain that entire time, then in theory, by the math, you'd end up with another extra 5 to 10 PIV at the end of the year. Now, it might not seem like a lot. However, if you think about, let's say you had that ability to do that with Bitcoin, right? Like, let's say you had 100 Bitcoin, and just by keeping your computer open, you could end up with 105 or 110 right at the end of the year. You got an extra 5 or 10. So it's basically getting 5 to 10% interest. Most banks, most of your quote-unquote traditional investment vehicles don't give you that. And so PIVX, because you as an individual are securing the blockchain, well, you should deserve to be rewarded for it. And so that's what we do.
All right. Now I get it. That's a good
Brian,
one.
it's Ed again from our interview from the Bitcoin conference. You just brought up an interesting thing when you talked about, one, being on the blockchain, two, being available. Are there any security issues with that? How vulnerable does the computer become when you actually leave it open like that?
Yeah. So you can, there's a multitude of things that you can do and ought to do to protect yourself, right? So all of our wallets you can have protected, password protected. There's a layer of security that we've put in. Running a VPN is always recommended, right? So just in general for good computer practices, because again, if you're just floating out there on the interwebs, you're not really private, right? Most people are tracking your IPs and logging them, et cetera, et cetera. So those simple practices that are always good to have will help ensure your security. Now, the wallet itself, the wallet itself and the technology itself is super robust and secure. Where the weakest link vulnerability might come in is if you are really sloppy with passwords, right? Or if you open up, random files that potentially have remote access to your computer. Those types of things. But in general, you're gonna open yourself up to a slew of other vulnerabilities anyway, right? So hackers out there, if they get access to your computers, they're looking through everything at that point. So it's not about the wallet itself. It's the more weak your link comes down to your personal, say, computer internet hygiene, as it were.
Okay.
I guess
that being said, we only have, at least in the PIVX network, we've had a few examples of where people had their PIV quote unquote stolen. But it was not done by those means. It was the person literally got duped into thinking, this person's going to help me, and they gave access to their wallet to that person, and the person ran off with the funds. So.
Okay. Good point to bring up for everybody. Cryptonomics. I wanted you to we got about a minute left, but I wanted you to give us a little synopsis on that and the devaluating rate.
Sure. So in any money system, we'll use PIVX for example. Currency needs you need a lubricant. It can be a lubricant for commerce, and so an inflation rate, so an amount of emission that's there, can help sustain that, depending on your economic model. So in PIVX currently it's around 4% a year. That ends out with a tail emission, meaning this: we don't have a hard cap in terms of emission. There's a hard capped emission rate of about 5 PIV every 60 seconds. However, there's no end to that. Right? So you have a steady stream of new circulating PIV going into the economy. Now, what happens over time, though, is this. We burn our transaction fees, right? So just like when you use a Visa or MasterCard and there's a transaction fee, well, in our network, if you're using our network, those fees are actually burnt. And they're really small. So I'm talking like a tenth of a cent, a tenth of a cent. However, when those add up over time, right? So in essence, what ends up happening is every block or every 60 seconds, as there is these new coins being emitted, depending on the global network, we could actually end up having more coins removed every 60 seconds than are being emitted. And so the coin supply becomes deflationary while still having coins being emitted.
Got it. We got to run, Brian, but thank you very much for being on the show. I want you back.
Gladly. Thanks, guys, and have a great rest of your day.
You too. Brian Dorian, Snappy, ambassador for PIVX.org.